Olá, boa tarde a todos e todas. Estamos de volta com a nossa segunda etapa do nosso primeiro dia de encontro. Espero que tenham tido um tempinho para se alimentar, para descansar um pouquinho. E quem teve a oportunidade de estar conosco hoje pela manhã, esperamos que tenham gostado, que tenham realmente, acho que as informações e os resultados de pesquisa que a professora Fiona Copeland nos trouxe realmente foram muito instigantes. Nós ficamos aqui, assim, muito pensativos e muito gratos por tudo que ela nos trouxe essa manhã. Antes de nós apresentarmos a nossa convidada, que trará uma outra pesquisa e conversará conosco, continuará conversando conosco, né, sobre as questões que envolvem a formação de professores de línguas nos anos iniciais de escolarização, nós gostaríamos de lembrar a todos e todas que é bem importante que vocês consultem o site do evento, tá bem? Lá no site do evento, nós temos toda a programação até o final do mês de outubro, temos todas as falas, todas as palestras, os links para os apresentadores e apresentadoras de trabalho, os links das salas virtuais estão disponíveis no caderno da programação do evento, tá bem? Então, consultem o nosso site. Eu vou pedir para o pessoal da organização, se puderem, por gentileza, colocar o link do site do EPIC nos comentários, para que as pessoas possam conferir. Hoje, às 4h, nós temos a nossa primeira sessão de comunicação. Então, nós queremos convidar a todos e todas, mesmo aqueles que não vão apresentar hoje, que não irão apresentar, mas que possam, né, estar na sala virtual, ouvir a apresentação dos colegas, né? Nós temos, assim, pesquisas maravilhosas, compartilhamento de práticas, então queremos incentivar a todos e todas. Às 4h às 5h15, nós temos a nossa primeira sessão de apresentação de comunicações orais do 5º EPIC e do 4º Seminário de Avaliação de Língua Estrangeira para Crianças. Gostaria agora de, mais uma vez, convidar minha querida colega e amiga, Cláudia Kawash-Furlan, que também estará conosco.
Boa tarde.
Oi, Cláudia.
Oi, Ju, obrigada. Boa tarde para todas, para todos. Estamos aqui novamente com mais uma palestra, muito animadas, né, para ouvir a professora Kaisa. De manhã foi muito bom, como a Juliana disse. Então, a gente reforça também para vocês continuarem fazendo os comentários, as perguntas, né? Às vezes você não tem uma pergunta, mas você tem alguma reflexão sobre o tema que vai ser discutido, coloquem no chat, por favor, que aí ao final a gente vai resgatar esses comentários, essas questões também, para conversar um pouquinho mais com a professora Kaisa, tá? Podemos apresentar?
Yes, we can now invite her to join us.
Yes.
Professor Kaisa Hahl.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you and nice to be here.
Thank you very much for being here, Kaisa. We are very anxious to listen to you. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to our public here. I think everyone has already read information about you and your text, but it's always nice to say it again. So today, Professor Kaisa Hahl is going to present a talk about teachers' skills and competences in early foreign language teaching in Finland, and some information about herself. Kaisa Hahl is an adjunct professor and a university lecturer in foreign language education and a teacher educator at the Faculty of Educational Sciences, University of Helsinki in Finland. She's also the responsible person for subject teacher education in the faculty. Hall's research interests focus on foreign language teaching, intercultural education, and teacher development. Hahl has been involved for years in several international teacher education development projects. She's currently a leader in a project that is developing early foreign language teaching through in-service training. So again, thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I am delighted to be here with you today. And thank you so much, Juliana, for inviting me to attend your conference with you today.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. Mine too. Yes, so I've been dealing with this early teaching of foreign languages now for the past 3 years or so, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, because it's quite a new thing here in Finland. But in this time, I've learned a lot more about it, and I've also had a chance to observe early foreign language teaching in Finland a little bit. So gradually gaining more knowledge and information about it. So today I will talk to you about a study that I did recently with my research assistant, and tell you a little bit more about what our teachers think that teachers in early teaching of foreign languages should have for their skills and competencies. But I'm really happy to be here with you today, and I hope you'll have many questions for me at the end of this presentation. And also, I had a chance to be to listen to part of the presentation with Professor Copland earlier today. So I'm sure that you will find some similarities, or maybe some common issues that I will also talk about. But we as teachers know that repetition is good for learning. So, and hearing things about from a different perspective maybe. So I hope that will be helpful for all of you as well.
For sure. We're going to start sharing the screen for you with your PPT, but I think it's ready. Yes. So,
all right. So should I just go ahead? Okay. All right. Yeah. So here's the title for my presentation: Teacher Skills and Competencies in Early Foreign Language Teaching in Finland. And we can go to the next slide then, please. And maybe you already are aware of the situation in Europe about early teaching of foreign languages. So it started in Europe already quite a few decades ago. So since the beginning of 1990s, there's been a trend to an earlier start in foreign language teaching here in Europe. Maybe some countries have been more of the earlier in this process, and they started earlier than some other countries. But in Finland too, there has been schools and there has been some teachers who have been doing it already in the 1990s, but it's only lately that we've started doing it nationwide. And of course, what an early start means, that can also be different in different countries in Europe. In Finland, we used to start teaching foreign languages at the age of 9, from grade 3 on. But now it's then earlier from grade 1 on. But there's all the different countries in Europe, when they have started teaching children earlier, there is this belief that younger learners learn a new language better, and that's then it's also the lot of or some researchers also, and then many, maybe even politicians, they might bring up the sensitivity period that young children have for learning foreign languages. But the situation is actually not so simple or so clear, because a lot of these studies that have been done about this sensitivity period are in a situation where children are learning a second language, or maybe they're in a school where this second language is spoken the whole time. So maybe in an immersion education situation, or when they're learning, or maybe like when immigrants have moved to another country and then they start learning the languages. Like in Europe too, the goal is that all children would learn, besides their first language or their mother tongue, that they would learn at least 2 additional languages. So often 2 foreign languages. So that is the goal. But the situation can be quite different in different European countries, because there are different factors that also influence how young learners learn the foreign language, or how even older learners learn the foreign language. And one of these issues is the amount of teaching that is actually given in the schools in the foreign language. Very often in Europe, the amount of teaching in the foreign language is only 1 to 2 lessons a week. And that is not very much at all. Like if one lesson is maybe 30 minutes or 45 minutes, then it doesn't amount to very much teaching in the foreign language. Some researchers say that the minimum amount in a week should be at least 3 times 30 minutes. So, but that's a situation that not all the schools or not all the countries reach this sort of situation. And that's also the case in Finland. And then another factor, of course, is teacher skills. And we will talk quite a bit about teacher skills in this presentation. But of course, teacher skills, they comprise of different competencies, but one of the major issues is their proficiency in the foreign language. And research shows that teachers who teach an early language don't always have a very high level of skills in the foreign language. And of course, that then influences also the amount of language that is heard in the class. And then another aspect is that what kind of skills and competencies the teachers have for choosing the right type of activities and tasks that are suitable for these young children in the classroom. So the teachers' pedagogical skills and their skills in foreign language education, of course, play a role in how well the young learners can then learn the new foreign language. Yes, thank you. And here I'm referring to Professor Enever's study from 2015, when she talks about the important elements in early teaching of foreign languages. And she's listed these 5 different elements that she thinks are central to how good the education in the foreign language is. And one of these is, of course, teacher expertise. And I will talk about that a little bit more in just a little bit. But the second issue is learner sustained motivation. And we know that very often when children start school or when they start a new subject, they can be very excited and they're really motivated. And it's quite easy to get young children engaged in different types of activities. But especially when the children, when they become older, and when the teaching of the foreign language, when it becomes more tedious, when they have to use more reading and writing and more grammar-based exercises and more using of a textbook, then the learning of the foreign language might not be so fun anymore. And that's when it's really crucial that their motivation would still be sustained, that the teachers would still be able to find the kind of activities and the right kind of tasks that they can keep their students engaged and motivated in learning and using the language. And that's, of course, something that teachers' expertise then influences a lot. But then the third element here is continuity of learning. And this is something that's really important, that if schools and municipalities, if they offer a language in the early grades, they should make sure that these children can also continue learning this language when they go into the higher grades, and maybe when they also change schools. So like the language path for the children should be ensured, that the time and effort that they invest in a foreign language in the early grades would then also be made available for them later on when they are on the higher levels of schools. And then the fourth element is setting realistic aims. And it's important that both the teachers and the learners themselves, but also the parents or guardians know that what kinds of results can be expected from 1 year of studying a foreign language when the students are very young, like in the first or second grade. Because sometimes the guardians might have this impression that especially if they believe that there is this sensitivity period, that these young children, that they sort of like sponges, they absorb anything that they hear in the class, that they would learn a lot of the foreign language. But when we're really realistic about it, and if there's only 1 or 2 lessons a week that they're giving this teaching, then the expectations for their learning should also be, they should be realistic. And in reality, then the amount of foreign language that the children learn is maybe not so much in the first and second grades, especially when the teaching and learning mostly done like orally instead of using different textbooks. But what is really important is that the children start using the foreign language right from the beginning. And that's an aspect that should be emphasized. And then the final element here is out-of-school learning. And this is something that some researchers say that without out-of-school learning a foreign language won't be successful. But it's also quite difficult, or it's been difficult for researchers to really study what the actual effect of out-of-school learning is, because it's when we're exposed to a foreign language outside of school, how can we measure it, how much we're engaged with it, or how we hear the foreign language. And especially if we think of English, at least here, like in Finland, a lot of the children, they hear a lot of English outside of the school. They might hear more of English outside of school than they do actually in their lessons, because there's music in English, there's the internet that has a lot of content in English, different kinds of games and plays and movies that are in English. And that way there's a lot of exposure, especially if the first foreign language is English. Maybe the situation is a little bit different, or the situation often is different if the language is something else. Like in Finland, for example, if the first language that the student would choose is, say, French, then likely they won't be exposed to that foreign language so much outside of school. But in any way, like parents it's good if teachers encourage the parents to try expose the students as much of the foreign language, even at home, if possible. And then we can go to teacher expertise. And this is, of course, something that is influenced by the teacher's different educational backgrounds and competencies. Research shows that in Europe, teachers can be educated in very different ways when it comes to teaching foreign languages. They might have an education for elementary or primary education, or maybe then they're a subject specialist, and sometimes they might be teachers who have not really received any education in the foreign language itself or foreign language education. So the message that we hear from many countries is that sometimes teachers are not well educated, and even if they would be offered different kinds of training, sometimes teachers might not be in a position to have the time and effort to participate in this in-service training before they actually start teaching the foreign language. But teacher expertise can be considered to have these different professional skills and also personal qualities that influence their teacher expertise. And these professional skills are made up, of course, of their language skills in the foreign language, and then also knowledge about how young learners learn languages. So early childhood pedagogy and especially in relation to learning languages would be important for teachers to have knowledge of. And then another aspect is subject didactics knowledge. And this is the like foreign language education that they would have the ability to select and use such tasks and techniques that are suitable for the children at the particular age level. But also teachers' personal qualities play a role, and prior research shows that it's very important that teachers would have an ability to create rapport with the students, that they would be able to sort of go be at the level of the students, and also like when they're able to create a pleasant atmosphere in the class, that they would use such choose to use such techniques and activities that are fun and appropriate for the children's age, and something that would be similar to something that the students or the children would do otherwise, because really at that age of 6 or 7 years age, they're still their studying and learning should come through play. And then research also shows that, especially in the early teaching of foreign languages, teachers can really benefit from their artistic and creative abilities, because teachers really have to sort of throw themselves into their job by acting or using their voice in different ways and using movement and singing. So they might have to sometimes even step out of their comfort zone to do their job well. And then we can go on. And here are some of the core ideas in teaching early foreign language. And when the children are young, they don't yet know how to read and write. So then the main input of the foreign language comes through listening. And that's why target language use is recommended, because the teacher is one of the main sources for the students to hear the foreign language. And of course, besides the teacher speaking the foreign language, the teacher can use different or can show different movies or use different kinds of audio or play different songs where the foreign language is also used. So that way the teacher is not the only source for the foreign language, but it's research shows that those teachers who have a higher command of the foreign language and they use a lot in the class, then their students have also learned the language better than those students whose teachers have a lower command of the language. But the techniques and activities that are used in a class, it's recommended that it includes a lot of movement, that it includes different types of action-based activities, and also songs. And songs could also be action songs. So anything that really are the kinds of activities that students would do otherwise as well. And because then these kinds of activities are such that really get the students enthusiastic about the content in the class and get them to play along. Also different types of activities like storytelling and other kinds of like stories and role playing, for example, they are also really good for the young learners. And although research does not really support the sensitivity period, like I just mentioned earlier, but something that the children have in their favor is that they are often really motivated about new things and also about being exposed to a new language. So they often have a positive attitude to something new that is being introduced, and also these different games and playfulness that is included in the teaching. And then that way it's easy to get them engaged in the activities. So when the teachers capitalize on these qualities and features, then they're likely more to succeed than in teaching the foreign language. And then we can go to the next slide. And then I will explain a little bit about the context here in Finland. So as I mentioned earlier, there's certainly been some schools or some municipalities where they've offered the first foreign language like earlier in the grade 1, or there's also municipalities that have daycare centers or like or early childhood education where they also offer teaching in a foreign language. But in it was in 2017 that the government created started these different government key projects, and this early teaching of foreign languages was one of them. And then the government started giving funding for different language projects and also training of teachers to teach these children younger than before. So now, since the beginning of last year, so January 2020, then all children all over in Finland have started their first foreign language in grade 1. Because before that, it was in grade 3. So now it's been lowered by a couple of years. But the government only gives funding for 1 weekly lesson. So it's only 45 minutes a week. And so that's not very much. And it's not as much as the research says that should be given in a week in order for it to really be successful. We do have some cities or some municipalities that give extra resources or extra funding to the schools, and they have doubled the amount of teaching. So for example, like the capital of Finland, Helsinki, in those schools, in Helsinki schools, they offer, or they give 2 weekly lessons to the students. But in the majority of the schools, it's only the 1 weekly hour. But many teachers, especially if they were interested themselves, they were offered in-service training before this change happened. And there's also been some training given after this early teaching of foreign languages came into play. And also, I've been leading a project that has also given this in-service training to 2 different groups of teachers from different parts of Finland. But in Finland, the situation is that it used to be more so that it was always subject teachers who taught the foreign language or the different foreign languages in Finland. But really, we call them class teachers, so they're elementary teachers. They're really qualified to teach any subject that is given in grades 1 and 6. So this means that they're qualified to teach English, or they'd be qualified to teach Portuguese if that was offered in the school, even if they didn't have any competence in that subject themselves. So for a lot of class teachers, when this early teaching of foreign languages started, then it would be a new subject for them. And of course, probably a lot of them had studied English before and they had knowledge of it, even though many of them had never studied it in the university, or they had never gotten foreign language education studies in the university. But we also have those teachers who don't really have competencies for it, and they might not really, if they were able to choose, they would not like to teach it, but yet they are made to teach in the schools. But then we have the other type of teachers, and they're the subject teachers, and they're the experts in teaching different subjects, and in this case, it would be the foreign languages. But for them too, this starting of the early teaching of foreign languages brought around a change, because they were not used to teaching these young children, because they were used to teaching children who could read and write. But now they would be teaching these children who've just started school. They barely learned to behave and learned how to be and act in the school. And now these teachers are then also teaching these young students. So they also had to, or they would also benefit from the in-service training to learn about the different types of activities and tasks that are good to be used with these children who don't know how to read and write. So in Finland, foreign language teaching is often quite textbook based, but now when the students are not able to read and write, then oral exercises and oral language is emphasized a lot more. And then we can go further. Okay, so now I will tell you about this study that we just had published this summer. So I did this study with my research assistant, Hahl Pietarila. And so what we wanted to find out in our study was that what kind of conceptions our different teachers in the schools had about the skills that the early teachers of foreign language should have in the schools. And we had these 3 different kinds of teachers. We had class teachers, so they're the ones who are like elementary school teachers, and they are qualified to teach any subject from grades 1 to 6. And then we had the subject teachers who were specialized in the foreign language, but maybe they were not used to teaching these children in the early grades. But then we also have these double qualified teachers, and these are teachers who are maybe educated as class teachers, but then as a minor they've had the foreign language, and then maybe they've also received some foreign language education. So some of the teachers were a little bit more qualified than just the class teachers or the subject teachers. And then we can go to the next slide. And we had these 2 research questions in our study. So we wanted to find out that what skills and competencies these different types of teachers considered important for a teacher in early foreign language teaching. And then the second research question was that what kind of language skills these teachers considered important for an early foreign language teacher. And then in the next slide, I have just shortly about the participants and the data in our study. So these were teachers who participated in our in-service training. Altogether, there was 44, and they were divided. Some of them were these subject teachers, and they were class teachers, and then these double qualified teachers. And during the in-service training, they did different kinds of tasks. We had some contact teaching sessions, 4 days in about a half a year. And then we had some webinars in between those contact teaching days. And then they also completed different tasks. And for our second round of in-service training, then the COVID pandemic started. So then we had to be more online, but yet we're able to pull off the training with the same tasks. But they wrote 4 essays during this time, and these essays were our data for the study. And some of the questions that we posed to them, or the topics that we wanted them to discuss in these essays, were teachers' conceptions and approaches to supporting student learning and use of games and activities. And then we also wanted to know from these teachers that what they thought about teachers' language skills. And then we asked them about any other essential skills and competencies that teachers should have in early foreign language teaching. And then we can go to the next one. Next slide. Yes, thank you. So here we have the 3 most important skills and competencies that our participants considered, or that they considered the most important. And these were actually those competencies that they all agreed on. So there's also some other competencies, but these were the only 3 that they almost like 100% of the teachers agreed that these are the most important. So the first one of these is the enthusiasm and ability to inspire. So really the teachers considered the most important that the teacher is enthusiastic about teaching this foreign language to the children, that they're able to inspire the students to also become motivated in studying. And they thought that if this was the starting point for the teacher, then even if their other skills were especially about language or foreign language education were not so high, but maybe then they would be motivated in also pursuing those other skills. And the second skill or competence was focus on children and the learning environment. So the teachers considered it really important that the teachers would be able to relate to the children, that they would like bringing content in the lessons that would be suitable for the children and would be something fun and meaningful for them, and that they would be able to create a pleasant and invigorating learning environment. Also, classroom management was mentioned in this competence. So it was considered important that they would have the tools to also manage the class, so that they would get on one hand to keep everyone active, but also to keep everyone engaged. And the third competence was skills for early years pedagogy. So this was something all teachers also considered important, that all teachers, no matter what their background education was, but that they would know how children learn and what types of activities are good for them at this level. And here I have some quotes from for this enthusiasm and ability to inspire. So here's a quote from one teacher, and in this one too, the teacher really emphasizes that the teacher's most important task is to motivate the students and to create a safe learning environment. So that was kind of like the basis, because if the learning environment is not motivating, and if it's not something inviting and engaging for the students, it doesn't really matter what the teacher does, but the students would kind of might not follow along. And then we have another example on the next slide. On this focus on children and the learning environment. And here, one of the big ideas was that the teachers would be able to provide such meaningful activities for the children, that the children from right from the beginning, they would get these experiences of success, even though it takes a little while for the students to learn more of the language, but they would start learning the language right from the start, and that they would have these moments of success and be able to feel proud of themselves with this new foreign language and what they can accomplish with it. And then we'll take another example from the skills for early years pedagogy. And here, like this teacher says, that teachers' own understanding and will to make teaching of high quality and to be able to plan diverse and motivating lessons and also obtain the necessary knowledge and skills are really essential. So this was, the third competence that was considered important by all of them. And then we'll go to the next four skills or competencies. So these are skills for foreign language education, willingness to develop one's skills, ability to throw oneself in the job, and using one's strengths. And these skills were considered important by some of the teachers, but not all the teachers mentioned them. And we noticed in our data that even though, our data was quite small, so we can't make any we can't really draw any big conclusions from this, but very often it was the subject teachers or then the double qualified teachers that were the most interested or most active about thinking of the different qualities that early teachers of foreign language have. But in the next slides, I'll have some examples of these as well. So here, skills for foreign language education, like this teacher says that the teacher should be able to speak fluently so that the students or children get proper exposure to the language. And then also the teachers would have knowledge of foreign language pedagogy so that they can plan the teaching to be efficient and also beneficial for the learners. And then we'll go on to the next one. And this one was about like further education or maybe lifelong education, that the teacher's willingness to develop their own skills. And they didn't think that teachers should only like attend different in-service training, but also that discussions with their peers were also valuable. That when the teachers have meetings together and when they have discussions and reflections together, they can really have these different brainstorming sessions and they can share their different types of knowledge. And that was also considered important. And then the next one. And this one's about their ability to throw themselves in the job. And this was related to the fact that many of the teachers really had to step out of their comfort zone, and maybe they were like, especially like maybe subject teachers, they were never used to maybe singing with their children, or they were not used to using these different kinds of games and plays, and now they had to with these younger students. So they wanted to, they encouraged teachers to be to have humor in the job and not to be so hard on themselves when they're trying these new skills out. And the last one was about using one's strengths. some of the teachers also mentioned that a lot of times the society or the schools or the parents give a lot of different kinds of requirements and pressure on the teachers of what you're supposed to do and what kind of teacher you're supposed to be. And they encourage teachers to really consider of what their own strengths are and use those strengths to be the best teacher that they can. And then the second question was about the language skills for teacher in this early teaching of foreign languages. And here we have these 4 elements: communication in target language, courage to speak and trust in one's language skills, basic grammar and pronunciation, and correctness and development of language skills. And again, in the next slides, I'll have some quotes from our data. And here, like the majority of the teachers, about 80%, they emphasize that communication in the target language was number 1. That teachers should not really worry so much about their own language skills if they were stronger or not so strong, but that they would be willing and brave to use any of the language that they have, so that because if they start paying too much attention to grammar and correctness, maybe then some teachers would not be brave enough to open their mouths in the target language. But then the next one is it's related to this courage to speak and trust in one's language skills. So I think the teachers really knew the situation in Finland too, that there are a lot of teachers who have to start teaching a foreign language even though they haven't taught it before. So they really wanted to encourage the teachers that just trust in your own language skills, and also like when you start using it, gradually they will get more comfortable with it and their skills will also improve. Some of the teachers said that that it was just sufficient that the early teaching or teachers of early language would just have the basic grammar and or pronunciation. So some of the teachers were not, or they overall they were quite lenient about teachers' language skills. That because they thought that that the content in the first grades in the target language is not so much. So is it so important for teachers to know anything more about basic grammar or pronunciation? So there was a little bit of difference of what they really wanted to demand of the teachers. But yet there were some teachers that really wanted to emphasize that that it is important that the language is correct, and that teachers should be willing to commit to developing their language skills, just like they should be committed to developing any skills or any content that they teach as teachers. And so then we get to the discussion. So as I mentioned before, the teachers, they really emphasize the skills for early years pedagogy, but then skills for foreign language education were not nearly as often mentioned. So there was a clear preference from the teachers that it was more important for the teachers to know how young children learn, but not so much of how they learn, like what kind of skills the teacher should have in actual foreign language education. And maybe this was because they knew that many of the teachers have not had any foreign language education. So then everyone should join different in-service training to gain that. And maybe they also realized what the reality in Finland is. So they didn't want to demand so much. But of course, there were some of the teachers that also emphasized that foreign language education was important. But then there really was no agreement on language skills, because some of the teachers, actually, the majority of the teachers, they thought it was important that the teachers would have this communicative ability and that they would be able to use the target language in the class. But there was a bit of a contradiction, because yet many of them said that, well, it's enough if they only have the knowledge of basic grammar and pronunciation. But we know that if somebody wants to speak the foreign language fluently, even if it is at the level of young children, you still have to have more knowledge in order to be able to do that. And something that we discussed in our study was that if we have these different types of teachers with different kinds of qualifications and different kinds of competencies. So how is the educational equality? So what about those students who have a teacher teaching them who doesn't really want to teach the foreign language and maybe doesn't have any good competence in the foreign language and doesn't have any foreign language education studies from before? So maybe those children are not getting the kind of education that they really should be getting in order to get a good foundation for their foreign language studies. So this was a concern that we had, that if the when we have teachers with such different qualifications, so how can we really say that that there would be equality in education? And that happens to be one of the foundational values in Finnish schools. Also, something that we noticed that was discussed very little by our teachers was cultural aspects in foreign language education. And as foreign language teachers, we know that cultural aspects and interculturality is a very big part of teaching foreign languages. But maybe those teachers who've never really studied the foreign language, or if they haven't gotten any foreign language education studies, maybe then they don't have the competence or the knowledge to then bring in these cultural aspects. But something really positive that we noticed also in our study was this collaboration between these different types of teachers, because all the different like the subject teachers and class teachers, maybe before they were a little bit, they were not so certain if the other type of teacher would be as good of a teacher to teach these children or to teach the foreign language, but they realized that all of them have these really good qualities that are important for teaching this early foreign language. And they realized that it's good for them to learn skills and qualities from each other, and so that they can share their knowledge and skills, and also like continue learning together. And then on my couple's next slides, I only have I have this list of references and also the next slide. But thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have some questions for me now.
Thank you very much, Kaisa. It was very nice to listen to you. And again, today in the morning when we were listening to Fiona, we were thinking, wow, so many things that we can relate to our context, so many things that are similar to Brazil. And the feeling was that, good, we're not alone, right? So we share the same challenges and the same concerns. So it was very nice to listen to what you brought here. And as teacher educators and as teachers, we are very pleased to listen to this and to know that we have so many things to continue, right? To keep studying. Do you want to comment anything, Juliana? Or can we go to questions?
Yeah, I think I'd like to once again, Kaisa, thank you for sharing with us the results of your research. I have already told you that when I had a chance to get to know your research at ILA in Netherlands, I was like, wow, it seems that we have so much in common. I mean, the challenges and all the trials and, everything we have been trying to do here in Brazil concerning teachers' education to be in this context of very young learners. So for sure, we have many things to keep on talking about, researching, and collaborating. So thank you very much. I think we have some questions, right, Claudia, and some comments. People are, again, thanking you, saying it was a lovely talk. But I guess we have some questions here. Would you like to...
Yes, we can go on. I think Gabi can show Jackie Tonelli's question. Yes. So she talked about this. Considering that our Letras graduation courses don't provide teachers the knowledge we need to teach young learners, the support from the institutions we work for is very important to our studies. And I think this question is, thank you, Jackie, for your question. And I think this question is very appropriate because as Kaisa was talking about, in Finland, they have the subject teacher and the class teacher, and the ones that have the double qualification. In Brazil, we have pretty much the same context, as we have those who graduate from pedagogy courses and those who graduate from languages. And then some can go on and have a double major, so they can have another undergraduate course, but for some, it's not possible, and we don't think this should be the way, right? It's hard to have one undergraduate course, imagine having a double major or another undergraduate course. So it is the situation that we have here, how to get qualified. And then Jackie is asking about this. So if you could comment.
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge for institutions or teacher education institutions to fit all the different kinds of courses in their programs that they should, because it's like in our case too, like the subject teachers or the subject teacher education has traditionally focused on teaching the older children and teaching youth and maybe teaching adults. But before, we didn't talk anything about teaching these children who don't know how to read and write. So that's something that we've also had to consider in our teacher education program. And so now we have a little bit of that in our program, but do we have sufficiently? Likely not. So I think it's something, it's always trying to weigh the kind of like trying to balance out the program so that there would be, something for the different contexts that the teachers will meet later in life. But I think the truth also is that it is a limited number of courses and limited number of years that we have our students in the university or in our institution. But then we also have to emphasize the in-service training, that we have to make that more available for teachers, and for learning about different, like maybe action-based methods, or how to use these more creative and engaging teaching methods. So I like, it's not only just for the young children, but also like for we should keep the fun and the games and the play in our teaching also for the older students. And I think that's often a challenge here too, that maybe now we're learning how to have it for the young children, but do we also do it for the older, for the older students, like the youth and younger adults?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kaisa. And I think there's another question that Juliana Brossi wrote on the chat that is pretty much what you were saying. So would you say that in-service training is as effective as pre-service training when we look at all the roles that we are supposed to achieve?
Well, I think in-service training, it fulfills a different role than pre-service training. Like, there's no way that we can train our teachers we can't give them examples of all the different situations that they're going to meet in the school life, right? So what we want to do is that we want to equip them with different kinds of knowledge and skills that they can use later on, that they know where to look for more training or more help, or that they would be able to work on and develop their own personal practical theories, that they know what the values and foundations are of their own teaching and what is like the core of their own teacher identity, and build it from there. And then, and also, like, our society changes, like, for example, this early teaching of foreign languages, this is very new in Finland. So of course we didn't have it in our class teacher education program 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We actually don't have it as mandatory studies even right now in my university. We're trying to push for it, but we don't. So the society changes, and like right now we don't know like what kinds of skills teachers will need in the future. So that way the in-service training is very important, that then we can offer training for special kinds of skills and competencies later on. Like, another issue right now is using different ICT, different tools and equipment, and just having skills for that, or different interdisciplinary learning modules and those kinds of things. So there's plenty of need for in-service training, and I think it should be factored in as part of the lifelong learning for teachers.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we nowadays in Brazil, we have been facing this challenge of pre-service teachers, because we don't, as you were saying, we don't have time and room for everything that we would like to have in our undergraduate courses. We have to cover so many things. Now with the pandemic, we can see how much we need to study technologies and all of these online learning. So every time things are changing, right? And we have so many things to cover. But we have this demand of bilingual schools that are increasing a lot in Brazil, and we need to focus on teacher education programs, not for these bilingual schools, not for these specific contexts, but for teachers, young learners, teachers for young learners. And I think this is what Juliana was mentioning here on the chat. That, let me see if I can find her question. How do we make our voices be heard? That there has to be a special focus on teachers' education for the graduation. So for the beginning of teachers' preparation, education, right?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I don't know exactly how your education works. So like how much of the like how many credit points, or I don't know how you calculate it, like for teacher education that you have for your graduates, or in order for the students to graduate. But I know like we have this similar issue here, that because there are so many different courses that are already mandatory for the students, both in their like bachelor degree and in their master's degree. And now that we really want to push, we really think that class teachers should also have this foreign language education in their studies. But like, what will be taken out if that is put in? So it's also we're going to be facing a lot of negotiations with the different like the heads of our faculty, or the people who determine like what are the different or the mandatory courses and what are the optional courses. So I think it's I think research is one that when we can do research and then show those people who make decisions, and maybe we need to also sometimes tell our government that and what better to show it with than doing research on the particular issues, that maybe we need more funding for something. So research is certainly one way to go, that so if we can do that, and also of course collaborating with the different stakeholders. And maybe in your case, maybe you can also get like the schools involved, and maybe even parents involved. And like I know that in many countries, when bilingual education became more, or maybe when bilingual education even started, it was often the parents who were the driving force behind it, that they were the ones who realized that, okay, well, this would be good for our children. So then they started pushing for it, and then things started changing. So I'm not sure if that's the kind of answer you wanted, but
oh, it's great. It's great. Thank you very much. And it's nice that you're mentioning about teachers' qualifications, their skills, and of course their personal attitudes and qualities as well. Because we have also been facing this problem of not being qualified, mainly because we have language schools, not regular schools, but language schools, that if you are proficient in the language, in English, you can get the job. And if you're going to teach children, there is this very wrong idea that if you are young and if you are fun and you are able to teach children, right? It's like, English, you laugh and you play some songs and that's it. and it's nice that you talked a lot about this, and it's completely out of this way. We have to insist on qualifications, on education. So I think it was very nice for us to see that we are on the same page, right?
Yes, yeah. And I think that in Finland we probably have a really good situation that the majority of our teachers are qualified, and they have their master's degree and so forth. But then now that this, like, a foreign language is a new subject for some of the teachers, so then and maybe some of the teachers have, like, even though they don't have the official qualification for the language or the foreign language education, maybe they've gained the knowledge, in some other ways, and maybe they are perfectly qualified in the way too that they can give. And I'm sure that we have a lot of teachers that even without the extra qualification for language, that they can give perfectly good education for the children. But then when we know that the situation is not for all of them, so I think that it would be really important that, just like you said, Claudia, that they would be qualified. That not only that they, it's important that they're interested and enthusiastic about teaching that, but yet that's not sufficient.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I also think that something interesting that you've mentioned, Kaisa, when you were answering to Juliana's question, I think that research is what we have in our hands to show people the needs, the realities. So I think that as much as we carry on this, what we have already been doing, right? Researching and collecting data and listening to the teachers who are at school, what they need. I think that we can, with maybe baby steps, right? But we can approach principals and school community. And I totally agree with you when you say that one way would be bringing families and parents and trying to listen to them to see what they really think about this, what they need. Yeah, so I think that research is the way for us to, I don't know, to show what has already been done, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that collaborating with also, like, internationally with and learning about the research that has been done elsewhere, even though we can't like completely compare different contexts maybe because they are a little bit different, but yet there's a lot of things that we can learn. I'm sure that there would be a lot that we could learn from your context too. So I'm looking forward to further collaboration with you on this issue.
For sure. Do you think you have more questions, Claudia? Yeah, we have one more.
Yes, we have this one from Juliana. So would you say that teacher graduation should evolve to a partnership between pedagogy and languages when we think about Brazilian universities? So the situation that we have is this, right? The undergraduate courses that teachers usually have in order to teach children are these two. They graduate into pedagogy or languages to teach children, and then we usually have this idea of which one is going to help more, and sometimes they go on to have both. But as Juliana is already saying here, we should need to have this collaboration, right? Because it's not just one or the other.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Like how it works for us too is that, like, if it's about subject teachers, like for foreign languages, they first go and study the subject matter in the subject faculty, and they do their bachelor degree, and then they come to us for 1 year to do their subject teacher education, and then they go back for 1 more year to finish off their master's degree in the subject faculty. But also, like, I think it would be like, ideally, I think even the subject faculties would have some pedagogical content in their language courses, that it wouldn't only be about linguistics and literature in the language, but that they would have some courses that are catered to future teachers, and that would, combine the language and pedagogy. So I think that would be an ideal situation. And also, like, teachers or professors from the pedagogy department or faculty and the language faculty, that they would collaborate together. And that's actually something that we're trying to also, like, increase and improve in my university right now, that we have these meetings between the different parties who participate in language teacher education. So we have the subject faculties, and then we have us working in the Faculty of Educational Sciences, and then we also have our teacher training schools who are actually part of our faculty, but they're, they are they are the actual schools that, with the school children. So then teachers in those schools, and then as university lecturers and professors, then we need to also collaborate and discuss, the content that we teach and our approaches, so that the program would be more aligned, and that we would know what students learn in these different instances. And I think through that we'd be able to also develop the program.
Thank you very much.
Now, Kaisa, I would like to ask you something that I was just thinking to myself concerning the data you shared with us. I was just thinking, when you say actually the research you've been carrying out showed us that so there are three important skills and competences, right, that the teachers consider would be essential. Yeah. And I was just here thinking to myself concerning enthusiasm and ability to inspire. I don't know if you've mentioned that. If you have, please forgive me. But I was just here thinking to myself, how can we teach how to have enthusiasm and ability to inspire, right? I was just, wow. So how can we help teachers concerning, of course, the three of them are very interesting, but I was just here wondering, what can we do?
Yeah. And I think these can be maybe, the kind of personal qualities that the teachers maybe have innately. That is something that's also already in them. That maybe they're teachers who are really excited about teaching the children and students about anything. That it's maybe, could be something, that it's particular about the foreign language, or it's also about the novelty of being able to start teaching a new subject for the students. So maybe that's something. But yeah, I mean, like really these, like the three especially like this skill was more of a personal quality, and it's not really a skill or a competence that we would have separately, teaching about one course. But I think that maybe like when we teach or when we do teach our students about the different methods or different methodology that they should use in foreign language education, like the different tasks and the different activities and different exercises, well, I think that those are, I think those are like, those can be related then to this enthusiasm and excitement, that you choose the kind of activities that also then, would have more playfulness, and they would have more like game-based activities or action-based activities. And maybe they're also like maybe like also like what our participants in the study said, that teachers should be, they sort of like, like have to throw themselves into the job, that they have to have this creativity, and they maybe like to be brave in a way, that they really have to have these kinds of like skills that maybe if you're just lecturing about something, you don't necessarily have to have, because then you're just lecturing the content. But now when you really want to engage the students and emphasize that this learning is fun and it's meaningful, and the activities are also chosen in the way that they would be engaging and somehow invigorating, and such that would motivate and keep the students' interest. So I think that way too, I don't know, maybe in some ways, then the teachers they really have to like get in it themselves too, somehow. But to answer your initial question of how we can teach this, I think it's difficult. Maybe what you do is that we have to choose the kind of students that are already motivated. Like, when you choose your students into the programs, you want to, that's one of those questions that you want to ask them.
Yeah,
And maybe I also want to mention that I think these teachers that we had in our in-service teacher trainings, I mean, of course, these were teachers who were already, you know, they were all this. They were excited about, and they were committed to developing themselves, and they were excited about foreign language being a new subject, or being, you know, being made earlier in the schools. And so they were already really motivated. But then, yeah, maybe not every teacher is.
Yeah, and I also think that from my experience, that I don't know if Claudia agrees with me, but we can see that sometimes we have some students that they have like the profile. I always say that when I started as an English teacher in primary education, it was, you know, my favorite how can I say that, my favorite age to teach children. I mean, when the principal would ask me to go to 12, 13-year-old, you know, or with older groups, I would say, no, please, no, take me back to the, you know, to early childhood education. So I think that sometimes it's a kind of profile, right? And then we have to, the same way we have people who prefer, I don't know, working with translation or teaching literature. So I think that it's something that you can have the profile or the abilities, as you said, and somehow we can help each other. I truly believe in communities of practice, so we can help each other how to develop these abilities or these profile that we have, but many times we don't know how to do with that, because as you said, we don't have a chance to know how to work. Yeah, because when you are in contact with in-service teachers, they already know, or they know some of the challenges that they might encounter. When we are talking about undergraduate students, maybe because they are so young, they didn't have time, right, to experience everything in life. So even though they are already teaching, for example, I have here some of my students that even though they haven't finished graduation course, they have already started teaching, but they don't have these experiences in a daily basis, so that they can share with us these things that happen to them, and so they can share how to do and so on, these critical moments in the teaching, right? Whereas when you go to in-service teachers, then they have so many things to share. I mean, from real examples that they have been dealing with in their English classes. So they can bring these realities to the courses, to the trainings, and we can, as a community, try to help each other. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I like many of my students, when they start their teacher education year, and then before they have like 2 practice periods during the year, but before they go to their first practice, they so often they say that, oh, I'm not going to go teach at the elementary level, and also I don't want to teach the lower secondary school students because they are in the midst of puberty, and you know they don't listen to, and they are not interested, and you know, like that's a really difficult like age level. So they want to go and teach at the upper secondary school, because that's where the students know the foreign language, like they know the foreign language better, their proficiency is higher, so then the teachers would be able to also like use their language more. But then it is so interesting, and I think it's so neat, because then when these students actually go to basic practice, then they realize that, wow, these younger teenagers are so cool, and they, like, it is possible to get them engaged, and it's possible to get them excited in different kinds of games. And then if they get to teach at the elementary level, then very often they say that, oh, these children, they were the cutest, that maybe I want to teach at the elementary level after all. So often, like, they don't really know what it is before they actually get a taste of it in the school. And then initially when they thought they want to teach these upper secondary level school students, then sometimes they realize that was actually the most difficult age level, because then those students might be the hardest to get engaged in, more action-based activities, or they want to be stuck on their textbooks or behind their laptops, or so like if we're able to offer students experience in practices at these different levels, that would be optimal. And also that and it was also something that some of the teachers in our study said that that teachers should always keep an open mind, and be willing to change their perspectives, and also like be willing to learn, because then they get new perspectives, because we don't always know what things are like before we try them out, and that way we should keep an open mind and be willing to try things out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Kaisa, because and I hope that we have, right, Claudia, some of our colleagues here listening from us, because we've been trying to show that even though we don't have in our Brazilian laws, we don't have anything particularly, saying that we have to train teachers, to educate teachers, to be in this context of elementary schools. I've been saying this for the last, 10 years, Claudia, that they have the right, even though it's not written, right? We don't have laws about that saying that we have to. I believe that, as you said, there a word that you use that to me, it makes the whole sense, which is experience. Because if they don't experience, they will never know how it works, and they will never know if they want to invest on this age group, So I usually give I use this metaphor that it's like a doctor, right? When you finish medicine school, you have to know that there is kidney, heart, throat, eyes, I don't know, at least to know that you have all these, parts of your body. And then you decide if you want to be a heart specialist, a stomach specialist, or, but at least okay, I have a stomach, people have heart, so I might choose to, to act in this area. So following this metaphor, I think that we should we have the responsibility. Our future students, they have the right to know that there are different age groups. And we could also mention here children with special educational needs, for example. It's something that happened to me. I could, experience this in my teaching career, because when you face the presence of special educational needs children in your class, you are just like, wow, and now what do I do? Nobody told me that I could face this experience. And I think that not letting our students, our undergraduate students, to know that they might face these situations, it's not fair, right? So at least that we should expose them to all these different situations and experiences, and they decide, yeah?
Yeah, that's true. And then I think that also that, because that I don't know how many like different practice periods you have in your education system, but like in some ways, like it's not possible for us to expose them to everything, but somehow that we just we teach and hope that they will develop this preparedness during the studies, that whatever comes along, they will be able to manage the situation. And then they're also I'm sure that in your school system too, that the teachers are not there alone, that they're also like different professionals who work at the school. So then, you turn to your colleagues, you turn to these other specialists who are in the schools, maybe they have special education teachers who sometimes are in the class, or at least you can discuss issues with them and like learn from them. And because situations change, and I think for teachers, every single day is different in the school, and we don't know what the children and the students come up with. So teachers sort of have to be prepared for unexpected situations, and develop this flexibility that whatever comes up, they'll be able to meet it and deal with it, and also like manage the different situations.
Thank you, Kaisa. I don't know if you have more questions from
I
the
think there
audience.
was another question from Felice. I think Gabi showed, but we were talking about another topic. Yes, yeah, this one. So would you comment on how the participants of your research see creativity and ability of using ludicity as a skill that teachers of English as a foreign language for young learners should have? Is this something we can learn? I guess you talked about this, but I don't know if you want to complement.
Yeah, that having like being creative and yeah. Well, this was like some prior research had also shown that their artistic ability, like teachers' artistic abilities and their creative abilities, are important, especially when teaching these young children and teaching a foreign language. And even though our respondents didn't use exactly these same words, but I think this was related to it when they said that teachers should be willing to go out of their comfort zone, or that they should be able to, or let themselves kind of like throw themselves in the job, that they want to get engaged and kind of like and also like use humor in the class, and also humor on themselves, that not be so worried about their professional image if they now start using some of these playful games or some kind of techniques and tasks in the class that they've never used before with older children. Like I actually remember one subject teacher telling me that after she started teaching, like before she'd only taught these children from like 9 and up, and then when the early teaching they started a project with that earlier in their school. And she thought in the beginning, she wanted to make sure the door was closed and that there would be no teachers walking past in the corridor and peeking through the windows, because she didn't want anyone to see that she's sitting on the floor with these young students or young children, because that was not part of her teacher identity before. Because before she was teaching these older children, and sort of like her professional teacher image was also somehow like a little bit different. Then now she started then learning how to use these children's games and more of these, more playfulness in the class. But then, little at a time, and gradually she noticed that it was just fine, and that became part of her teacher identity. And she realized that that's really the way to go when you're teaching these young children.
Wow, very interesting, right? Thinking about the teacher's identity. Yes, very nice. So we have another one here. Good. People are asking questions. Can you comment on what is the role of teacher education curricula in this debate? Can we reimagine a curriculum that addresses this inspiring skill?
Well, I think that the role of the teacher education curricula is very big when we're talking about any new content or any new skills that teachers should have. And like I discussed earlier, that we don't have our class teachers don't yet have a mandatory course on foreign language education, and that's something that we would like to, as language teachers, would like to have included in it, but we will have to have some negotiations with our faculty people to see if that's something that can be included. But I think that nowadays the teachers have realized, and I don't know what kinds of news you read in your newspaper, but very often we see these headlines of how children or youth, they're more bored in the schools, or they're more disengaged, or there's more challenges with classroom management, and sort of like, our children, our youth are, maybe because we've got the cell phones and we've got all these different kinds of games and gadgets, and we're on the internet, and we're being disrupted by different kinds of information all the time. So we, our children, our youth, maybe even as adults, we don't like the kinds of teaching methods that we had before. So I think that way we have to adapt our teaching methods, and maybe we have to also adapt our it is actually part of our like basic education curriculum already, that the child is in the focus, that like teachers, we've also had to, or we've had to change, or we should be changing the the traditional roles of the teachers, that they're not teachers, not the one who's always steering everything in the classroom or giving lectures, but the focus is on the child, and the children are the ones who should be engaged in different activities and in meaningful tasks and meaningful discussions, and that will help them to learn. And also, so maybe when we as teachers, or when we try to adapt to these kinds of methods, then we have to think of our own mindset too, that because especially with younger children, but I also believe in it, that this can be problematic, or this is an issue that we really should work on with the older students, so that they want to keep on, for example, to learning a foreign language, because later on learning a foreign language is a lot of work, when you have to learn more grammar, and you have to read and write and all kinds of stuff. So somehow we have to, I think we should keep it in the center of our thinking, that we have to make learning fun and meaningful, that we have to do our best in inspiring our students in continuing to learn, and the way we create and the learning environments, and what kind of classroom climate we want to build. That's something that we really have to emphasize, and we have to work on, and of course teachers don't do that alone, because we need the students' help in that. But if we provide them sort of like the kind of platform where they feel comfortable, and especially in a foreign language classroom, if we want them to use the foreign language, then we want to make it so comfortable and pleasant that they're not afraid of making mistakes, and that there's plenty of opportunities for using the foreign language. So we have to have that inspiration, in it too, because if the students don't want to do it, they might just not want to, that we can't really force them to, but we want to, approach it from a positive perspective, and try inspire our students with these different kinds of engaging and more meaningful activities.
Wow, very inspiring. Thank you very much, Kaisa. Yes, that's very, and we should think about this for all audiences, right? Of course, for children, because this is our target audience right now, but for everyone, in adults too. As you were talking about this, I was thinking about my students, undergraduate students, how they have changed, how their languages have changed. Sometimes nowadays, because we are with online classes, they start typing on the chat, and sometimes I don't get the jokes that they are using, and they are referring to things that are on social medias, on things that I don't know, and they are communicating, and sometimes they are doing the dishes, and they are paying attention to the class and participating. They are doing many things at the same time. So people are changing, times are changing. So our teaching practice should change as well, right? For the benefit of our students, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes. And that requires new skills from us teachers too. And then I think, and we have to do a lot of work to sort of to stay on top of what's happening in the children's lives, and what are the kind of activities they like to do, and also for the older students, and also for adults, like in the university, that we have to keep up with the times too. And even at the even in our institutions and universities, we have to keep on learning new things and new perspectives, and stay curious, and learn from other people's research, and from other contexts too, because I think that's also really valuable always, when we can share experiences between different countries and contexts, and find similarities, and then sometimes find that, okay, hey, they figured out something good, maybe we can try do that too, and so forth.
Yeah. Thank you, Kaisa. I think we are almost going to the end, but just before that, I'd like to ask you to comment a little bit more on one of the findings that you've mentioned during the discussion of the data, when you mentioned that there was no agreement on language skills. I was just, would you comment a little bit more on that, please?
Yes. So, like the majority of the respondents, they said that the communicativeness in the class was the most important. That they thought it was really important teacher would use the foreign language or the target language, and that they would, that they would speak it, so then the students would hear it. But then at the same time, they said that, well, it's not important that the teacher has a very high level of language skills. That it's just enough that they just know basic grammar or basic pronunciation. But then when we know that, like, what it requires for someone to be a fluent speaker, so it's not sufficient that we just know some vocabulary, or if our vocabulary is very limited. Like, even though, like, with young children, the amount of vocabulary that we're going to be using in grade 1 or 2 with the children, maybe that's not so large. But then if that's the only vocabulary that the teacher knows, the language in the classroom is likely not very rich. So that's what I meant, that there was this controversy between with their what they really wanted from the teachers. But I think that, like what we mentioned in our study too, was that maybe these our respondents, they knew what the reality in Finland was, that we have teachers who are made to teach a foreign language, and they've studied, like, if the language, most often the foreign language is English, even though, like, one of the major goals for lowering the starting age for foreign language was that students would be able to take other foreign languages, so that, like, the language reserve in Finland would widen. But in practice, it is that often the children don't have a choice, that the first foreign language is English. So English is something that probably most of the teachers have studied in their schools, like, when they were in school, in basic education, upper secondary education. But and maybe often we think that, well, everybody knows English, but really it's not the case. We have people who maybe they can understand if English is spoken, but maybe their own language abilities to really produce the language is not so high. So then and that's because we do have those kind of teachers too, who are made to teach a foreign language even though they don't really want to. So then I think these respondents said that, well, even they can manage with the basic level of vocabulary or basic pronunciation. But then there was also worries that, okay, well, what if it's a teacher who doesn't have good pronunciation? Then maybe then the students will learn these wrong language forms in the beginning, and then later on, when they go to a class that is taught by a subject teacher, maybe that subject teacher will have to struggle to try then reteach the right forms. So that kind of issues also came up in our study, that ideally they want communicativeness and a lot of communication, but on the other hand, maybe they can't demand it from all.
Thank you, Kaisa. Yeah, this is something that we also face here in Brazil. And I think that there is room for going further and doing more for the teachers, right?
Yes, that's right. But I also think that maybe it's easier for us to offer in-service training about early language, or early childhood pedagogy, or early years pedagogy, like those subject teachers who are not used to teaching these young children. So it's easier to take this pedagogy course, and also it can be easier to teach about methods that are good for foreign language education. But then for a teacher to actually learn to speak a foreign language, we know that we don't just learn it from one course. It's taken us years to learn any foreign language that we speak, and that's what it's going to take for those teachers as well. So I think that way, maybe sometimes this issue is not taken so, or maybe it's not considered fully, or when teachers are made to teach without the actual proficiency for the foreign language. But then maybe if it is a teacher who's really interested about it, then they're willing to take on the effort and the time that it takes to learn the foreign language better, and likely they have some background information or some background knowledge. of it anyway. So maybe for some, maybe just some extra courses will be sufficient, and they will be able to do well.
Thank you very much. I think we don't have any more questions. We have lots of comments. People are thanking you, and they're saying that it was very nice, thanking you for sharing your knowledge and your experience. And of course, we agree with them because it was amazing. It was very nice for us to get to know a little bit of your experience, because we know you have a lot to share, but we have a limited time here. But it was amazing. Thank you very much, Kaisa. And we are very, very happy to have you here and to have this collaboration with you, as you said in the beginning. So we hope we can continue studying and learning with you. Okay.
Thank you so much. It was really my pleasure to be here with you today. And thank you for all the great questions and comments, and for this whole session. It was really, really a nice session for me too.
Thank you so much, Kaisa. And for sure, we're going to keep on talking. We will be in contact.
Yes, definitely. We will keep in contact, and we will plan some kind of collaboration with you for the future.
Oh, yeah. Okay, it will be a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yes, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. So, people, I think it was, we had great time. Yeah? E aí, Cláudia?
Muito bom.
Muito bom, né? Acho que nós temos muitas coisas para continuar pensando. Acho que a gente vai um pouquinho na linha, né, do que nós dissemos hoje pela manhã, quando a professora Fiona Copeland terminou a fala dela, né? Quantas coisas que nós temos em comum, quantas coisas que, sim, as realidades são diferentes, né? Nós poderíamos ficar aqui discutindo sobre várias questões, mas acho que da mesma forma, né, Cláudia, que nós mencionamos hoje de manhã, a gente se sente, assim, no caminho certo, com as proposições corretas, né, com essa preocupação, principalmente nós, né, que atuamos nos cursos de letras, na formação de professores, essa preocupação que nós temos de realmente olhar para o nosso entorno e perceber que é um contexto que vem crescendo, né, e que a gente precisa, como ela bem colocou, né, acho que a gente continuar aprendendo, não fechar os olhos para outras possibilidades, né, e poder avançar e pensar em outras possibilidades de educação mesmo, né, tanto inicial quanto continuada.
Com certeza, com certeza.
Bom, gente, nós gostaríamos de agradecer, né, imensamente, um sábado à tarde, tantas pessoas aqui conosco, ficamos muito felizes, e assim, por isso que o nosso grupo se chama Felice, né, porque nós somos sempre felizes com o que nós fazemos, e só para lembrá-los e lembrá-las, né, o pessoal vai colocar aqui no chat o site do EPIC, né, nós temos um site do evento, nele vocês encontram toda a programação, caderno de resumos, os links para as salas das comunicações oral, né, que agora nós teremos, então, a primeira sessão de comunicação, né, então nós temos a sessão de comunicação 1, que vai iniciar às 16h, nós convidamos a todos e todas, mesmo quem não vai apresentar, né, que acessem a sala virtual, participem conosco nesse momento de partilha, de aprendizagem uns com os outros, né, nós sempre desejamos tanto momentos de aprender juntos, né, a gente fica desejoso mesmo, acho que essa é a palavra, eu queria ver como você faz o seu contexto, eu preciso de ideias, né, o que nós falamos agora há pouco, né, desenvolver as nossas habilidades, a nossa criatividade, e eu particularmente acredito que esses momentos em que nós compartilhamos as nossas pesquisas, compartilhamos as nossas práticas docentes, elas são riquíssimas para nós termos ideias, para nós termos, né, enfim, inspirações para a nossa prática de sala de aula. Então, fica o convite. Olha, o Marco André está dizendo que ele será o
Marco
primeiro.
aí, ó.
Olha lá, gente, vai
Muito
abrir,
bem, Marco.
vai puxar a fila do EPIC com a primeira apresentação.
Vamos
Que legal,
começar bem.
Marco. Vai cortar a fita?
Vamos começar bem.
Professora, só para lembrar dos apresentadores de postarem a imagem que eles receberam.
Isso, nós preparamos um presente para os apresentadores, para as apresentadoras. Vocês receberam 2 imagens, uma em inglês e uma em português, né? Assim, como uma forma, o EPIC, gente, para quem já participou do presencial, ele é um evento muito afetivo. Então, a todo momento, a gente tinha um mimo, um agrado, uma hora era um bis, um pão de mel, um algodão doce. E esse ano a gente não pode, gente, não podemos fazer nada. Então, nós ficamos pensando o que teria de virtual para a gente presentear, né? Principalmente aqueles que escolheram compartilhar, porque são escolhas, né? Escolheram compartilhar conosco os resultados de pesquisa, suas práticas. Então, os apresentadores e apresentadoras de trabalho receberam, então, como um presente, 2 imagens, uma em inglês e em português, para vocês, né, mostrarem para as pessoas nas redes sociais, postarem a imagem que vocês receberam para marcar a presença no nosso evento.
Muito bom. E lembrando, então, como a Juliana disse, né, para poder acessar aí depois o site, o caderno de resumos, porque o evento vai até outubro. Então, esse formato a gente explicou no início, né, na abertura do evento, o formato diferente, até para não ficar muito intenso esse tempo de tela, a gente fica aqui o tempo todo, então a gente foi dosando, mas aí a gente também não quer que ninguém esqueça, né? Então, fiquem aí com o caderno, acompanhando, a gente tem encontro na quinta noite, depois a gente tem de novo num sábado, depois durante a semana, então, e acompanhando as redes sociais. Eu sou meio ruim para acompanhar redes sociais, então eu já imprimi o meu caderninho aqui, né, bem das antigas, mas vocês da rede social, vocês vão acompanhando para não esquecer quando que vai ter, quando que vão ter os encontros.
Então, tá bem. Muito obrigada, Cláudia, obrigada. E a gente se encontra às 4h na nossa sala virtual para as apresentações. Muito obrigada. Até mais.
Obrigada, gente. Até daqui a pouco.